I am Rosalind Thompson. I'm the library director at the Knoxville Library. And Heather Libby is the adult services librarian at Knoxville. And wanted to just greet you and thank you for joining us for the writers panel. I just love the title, We the Interwoven. And here's a little blurb from the series itself. The series is a testimonial to the story of today's Iowa, a uniquely beautiful tapestry woven from people of many backgrounds, many of whom are experiencing America for the first time through the lens of our state. I just love that idea. We wrote the grant. It's a American Library Association grant, and the grant is called Libraries Transform Communities. And as part of our lifelong learning series, we wrote a grant to celebrate diversity and inclusion. So we're so happy to have all of the writers here and all of you for joining us. It's a series written by emerging writers who are immigrants and non-native Iowans. And as a non-native myself, I'm just looking forward to all of the stories and experiences that all of the writers have had coming to Iowa, and just, celebrating all of the stories that they have. Thank you to Andrea Wilson, who will be our moderator for tonight. And so I will let her take over. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, Heather. Thank you to everyone that made this evening possible. Thank you to all of you who are tuning in from Pella, from Bussy, Pleasantville, Melcher, Dallas, Knoxville, Des Moines, Perry, Jefferson, and more. We are so excited that you're all here. I want you to meet the writers. So if you are one of our writers, will you hold up either your book or your hand so people can see you on the screen? We have Iyad Saeed there with his book in the blue shirt. Yes, we have Shalini Jasti. We have Kwaponi Sawadal. Yes, Hiba Jarmakami and George Call. Did I get everyone? All right, so you can see them there in their videos. So we are so excited to be here tonight to talk about We the Interwoven Volume 3. I'm going to give just a little bit of an introduction, but then I really want to turn it over to the writers because they are who you've spent the time with, reading their stories. And I just also want to share, I know this is going to be very special because your feedback and the ways that you've all read and discussed this book are the dream that we had when we created it. Our hope was to create a window into possible discussions and sharing new perspectives, and that this book might be the foundation to have some of the very conversations that now you've had. So we really see this as sort of a two-way presentation, and my hope is we'll have at least a half an hour at the end for Q&A, and we're so excited to hear some of your questions. And when it gets to that point, I'm happy to field them as the moderator, and you can also put them in the chat. So that may be the easiest for me to just kind of read them from there. But if anyone really wants to ask their question directly, we can make that happen too. Just a quick history of the book. This book was created through a fellowship that I founded called the Bicultural Iowa Writers Fellowship. And each of these writers worked on their story and the full first draft story arc editing process for about a total of a year. We received a grant from the Iowa Arts Council that helped fund a portion of the creation of this book. And we have been so pleased to have their support for 3 years in a row to create 3 separate volumes of this book. So we have a trilogy now. And volume 3 was a very special one, and also one where we had new challenges because this was the first book we ever produced in the middle of a global pandemic. So as all of you probably had a very different reading experience and have had a really different life the last few months, so have we, and we've missed each other. And so this is an opportunity for us to really have a joyous moment and come together and connect over something that we did together through hard times. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first writer tonight, a wonderful gentleman who is the first writer in the book. So we're trying to go, I think we're in order of our book this evening. And we also send our love to Salma Salama, who is also featured in the book and had a recent family loss. And so she couldn't be here tonight, as well as Dahata Will, who we dearly love and had another engagement. But we're so happy to have 5 of our total writers. Iyad Saeed was born in Damascus, Syria. He lives with his family now in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. He earned a master's degree in banking and finance from the University of Damascus before getting a PhD in mathematics from Louisiana State University. A husband and a father of 2, he's an assistant professor of mathematics at Mount Mercy University. He hopes to explore the wounds caused by the terrible tragedies that have taken place in his country and to be able to tell more Syrian stories to the people of Iowa. May I introduce you to Iyad Saeed.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for joining us. I'll be reading my artist statement first. I was born in Damascus, Syria, and lived there until I was 30 years old when I traveled to the United States to study mathematics. I spent 20 years in the Syrian public education system, where I was never asked about my opinions. I was never taught how to write critically, or how to debate or defend a non-scientific point of view. I didn't even know students in other parts of the world learned these skills until an English professor at school where I work told me that he was using a book called The End of Policing by Alex S. Vitale to teach his writing class. This came as a complete shock to me. It was not the topic itself that surprised me. It was the fact that students were expected to read the book and write essays to express their opinions that might be different than the authors or the professors. I believe that the education system in any country aims to create good and productive citizens. What each regime defines as a good and productive citizen, though, might vary widely. Under a dictatorship, like in Syria, a good citizen is one who agrees with the government without argument. It can be dangerous to express any countering opinions because free voices scare tyrannies. So while I never had an issue explaining a math problem or talking about a scientific theory, I always struggled with expressing my opinions. My friends used to describe my approach in arguing as a very mathematical one. After I moved to the States with my wife and baby daughter, part of me wanted to tell everyone about the tragedies taking place in my country. But I found that I was not able to wrap my mind around all that had happened. I thought that was because the details were far more complicated than my ability to keep track of them. When I was accepted to the Bicultural Iowa Writers Fellowship, I thought I would take the opportunity to organize these details and tell these stories, starting with our own. It was then that I discovered there was a mental barrier, another part of me that did not want to remember and was blocking my attempts to relive what I witnessed. I'm writing to untangle all of these memories, to try to heal that part of me as I explore my past and learn to express my opinions. I also want to celebrate all the people we've met on our road to happiness and to share every act of kindness, big or small, they showered us and showed us, and the mark they left on our lives. Some left me with intriguing questions, some with regret. Most importantly, some helped us go on through dark times. Finally, I want this essay to be a message of hope to everyone who reads it. Happiness can be found. Don't give up looking for it. I'll now start reading part of my essay called The Polite Guest, a Syrian Father's Story. Part 1, Damascus, Syria, the good life. To begin to understand where I come from, you need to meet my family. And what better place to meet them than the kitchen? I grew up in Damascus, Syria. I moved 3 times in that city, and in all of those places, most of my memories have to do with the kitchen in one way or another. The divine smell of my mother's cooking would lead me there to steal a bite, or I would go there simply to hang out with her. Later, I would go to share with her a finjan of Turkish coffee and a cigarette behind my father's back. My mom always began cooking by sautéing onions and garlic. Whenever I tried to speak to her before it was time to eat, She'd say, I need to finish preparing lunch. Your dad will arrive soon, tired and hungry. Lunch is the main meal in Syria, the center of our day. It was always assumed that our family of four would gather around the kitchen table to eat together. My mom, a perfectionist, would cook at least two main courses to satisfy the picky eaters. Your dad doesn't like white sauce. Your sister can't eat tomato paste. She would say defeated, yet matter-of-factly. Rice and bread were common denominators, though. Wait until your father sits at the table before you start. She would say while still standing in the kitchen, but I'm hungry, Mom. I said, wait, fine. But I would sneak some bites anyway. I couldn't help it. I've always been a foodie. I was always the first to sit. I scanned what was on the table and picked my seat to be close to the foods that I liked the most. My dad sat down next, after he changed out of his work clothes. He was already looking forward to his nap on the couch after the meal. Then Mom would sit. She never sat before he did, ever. Sarah, food is getting cold. Mom would call my sister, who was always the last to the table. I think I got most of the food-loving genes when I was inside my mother, so when my sister was born 4 years later, she did not have as many. Strong, smart, and quiet, she kept a lot to herself. A trait all four of us share that we have never acknowledged in one another. My dad is not necessarily the patriarchal type, but my mom definitely is. A ship can never have two captains, she explained once. I'm not sure she enjoyed being the traditional second in command, but she excelled at it. I was not raised to be a kitchen helper, nor was my sister. Instead, Mom did everything herself, from getting the dishes out to putting the leftovers away. She even took the seeds out of watermelon, piece by piece, before serving it. She pitted olives for us as well until she developed neck and back problems. The kitchen was her center of gravity. She could usually be found there cooking, making coffee, smoking, or maybe all three. I can still see her sitting quietly in the white and blue room with her Turkish coffee cup, a small woman with silky black hair tied back in a bun or a ponytail, lighting a Gitan cigarette while something delicious cooks on the stove. My family was not the best at expressing feelings or making small talk. Conversations were expected to be started by my father, but he was not the talkative type, especially, especially when he was tired after work. I was the noisy one at the table, a relentless jokester. I would never dare to tease my dad, so instead Mom was the easy target of my silly, immature jokes about how she was shorter than me, or maybe about her obsession with cleaning. Your tongue has disowned you. Stop teasing your mother. My father always used that expression to say that even my tongue disapproved of the things I made it say. Mom did not mind though. She knew my jokes came from a good place. My sister would just give me an eye roll. But no matter what we said or did not say at the table, we all loved the perfect Damascene food, with the exact right combination of herbs and spices every time. It was a little annoying and yet funny to see how defensive Damascene families, like mine, could get about their recipes. In this unholy kitchen war, the main opposition was Aleppo, one of the largest cities in Syria and the center of industry. In a country where no one was allowed to think too much for themselves, food was a battle people felt they could fight and win. I visited Aleppo a couple of times, and I had to admit they have great taste in their recipes. They tend to use hot red pepper in almost everything, though, and I did not appreciate that when I was young, so I was always on Team Damascus. Add cumin to stuffed kusa. Mom would argue with her sister in Aleppo. Mulukhia is cooked with cubed beef, not any other meat, I would tell my non-Damascene friends. If food is the first way to understand the Syrian culture, then our holidays are the second. For those who want a window into life in Syria, Ramadan is the perfect example. For an entire month, Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. No food, no water, and no cursing, damn it. No fighting or arguing or other bad deeds. The idea is to build character and learn how to be a good human, even when feeling starved and exhausted. It's also a month of charity and giving. When fasting for the majority of the day, you know how the poor and needy feel. Ramadan was also marked by how much more households spent on food. I know it sounds odd and defies the purpose of the whole month, but it's true. Restaurants offer dine-in deals and packages to have iftar at sunset. Dessert shops and street food vendors were open almost 24 hours a day to meet the increased demand. Families would invite each other to iftar or even suhoor before sunrise. Some of my favorite memories are of this time of year. My mom's uncle did not have children of his own, so he treated my mom and her 7 brothers and sisters as his own kids after their father, my grandpa, died. He would invite the whole family to the same restaurant with the same menu once every Ramadan. It was so predictable that it was funny. But although many family members complained about this routine, they never missed the loud, boisterous gatherings.
Thank you, Iyad. Could I welcome everyone to give a little clap in the air, even if it's muted, just show our support. So special to hear you all read your stories and to hear them in your voice. And I'm sure those on the line had a voice in their head, but this is the first time of hearing the real one. So well done. Thank you so much. Our next reader this evening is Hiba Jarmakani. Hiba is an Arab American born of Syrian immigrant parents. She was 4 when her family moved to Sioux City, Iowa, where she grew up. She writes poetry and lyrical nonfiction as a form of resistance to existing American media narratives of the political landscape within the Middle East. More recently, her writing has confronted issues of identity and anti-Arab sentiment amid the ongoing war in Syria. She graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in international studies, focusing on issues in the Middle East. She's been published in Fools magazine and hopes to continue her education and work as a writer, challenging stereotypes wherever they may arise. Welcome, Hiba. It's wonderful to introduce you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I just want to start by saying, please bear with me because I do have a slight cough, but I'll try not to cough in the middle of reading. And I just want to start with my artist statement. I was born to proud Syrian parents, and their pride was instilled in me at a very young age. Even living in Iowa all my life, I found a way to mention I was Arab in every new conversation. I took my Arabic food to school for lunch every day and hung a giant Syrian flag over my bed in college. When I heard about people getting thrown off planes for speaking Arabic, I spoke it more loudly. I wrote poems, essays, and academic papers, all focusing on the plight of the Arab world at the hands of Western imperialism. At times, I was told not to research particular topics. If I posted my poems on social media, I was told not to be so political. Somewhere along the way, I started to come across this idea floating around that if you get to know someone of a certain background, then you will look at them and their culture with less fear. Along the lines of, I have an Arab friend who's very kind. He could never be a terrorist like those you see on TV. This idea left an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. Why should someone have to get to know me first in order to treat me as a person? Why must I yield the political power of my identity so as to not shatter the illusion that humanity isn't political? When I visited Syria in 2017 and witnessed the death and destruction of war, I found myself able to answer these questions. Innocent people that no one ever even had the chance to get to know were being taken from this earth prematurely, not because of a humanitarian situation born overnight, but as a consequence of their bodies merely being seen as political objects. I discovered that politics are both what empower us and what destroy us. But for them to empower us, we return to this idea of knowing someone first and then deciding if they are worthy to be human enough. After that trip to Syria, why must I became I mustn't wait for people to get to know me. I must share my story on my terms because my body is a living, breathing vessel that is able to be a bridge between 2 distant lands. It is a story that is uniquely mine, yet it includes elements of Syria because Syria exists within me, as does America. I tell my story not to stop other people's fear of me, but to be the rope and the bridge that brings Syria to Iowa. And in this way, the world becomes smaller, not in a fearful manner, but one that respects the roots of every soul that finds its home spread between 2 lands. And now I'll read a part from my story, The White Gate. It is the early 1980s in Syria, and if you were to look at the political landscape, you would encounter unrest in every major city. However, that is not the story we are following. Our story takes us to the small province of El Sueda, to an even smaller village of about 15,000 people in southeast Syria named Sulfad. The roads leading to this village are rough and often impeded by the crossing of livestock. As you approach the village, you will find reddish-brown terrain that is reflective of the considerable volcanic activity that once existed here. Farmers have segmented the lands using boulders that have broken down into smaller rocks over the years. And within these segmented fields, you'll find patches of green displaying grapevines, almond trees, pistachio trees, and olive trees. As the village draws nearer, your eyes will follow the cement and stone houses upward to a small mountain where the once formidable fortress of Sulfad sits. A rich history of varying occupants and shellings has reduced the fortress to the most iconic mound of stone and rubble within Sulfad. Now, if you are situated at the top of the fortress, you will see all of the village homes below bearing the signature red water tank on every roof. And if you look closer still, you'll see families sitting on their rooftops enjoying lebni sandwiches and one of the many rounds of meti to be had, and children riding their bikes up and down the streets at surprisingly dangerous speed. You'll hear the local watermelon seller over the megaphone with his latest catchy marketing slogan against the background of honking cars and motorcycles that every Syrian's ears have grown accustomed to. As you travel from the highest point in Sulfad to the base of the mountain, you'll come across both relatives and strangers. However, no one is truly a stranger in Sulfad. If you do not know their first name, you know them by their family name. And regardless of your relationship, you will always invite them into your home for tea or a small cup of famously strong Arabic coffee. Eventually, you will see a roundabout and you will know you have reached the Saha. Small shops line the streets of the Saha, selling anything from falafel sandwiches to motorcycle parts. There in this place, standing out against the landscape, is a white gate. Paint flaking off its iron bars from years of wear and tear. Between the bars, there is enough space for the onlooker to know that a stone house lies beyond the gate. It is beyond that gate that my story begins. The white gate was the realization of my great-grandfather, a proud man who once walked the streets of Sulfad barefoot with barely enough money in his pocket to feed his family. He worked tirelessly to save 15 gold coins and transform our dar, our family home, complete with its very own white gate. And gate is often understood to protect the inhabitants within it, and this one was no different. From the stones my great-grandfather first laid to the initials my uncle etched in those very same stones, each family member saw a piece of themselves within the white gate. Within its walls, the essence of family was captured. It was the safe place they would retreat to after facing the often harsh realities of the world waiting outside. Until one day, the harsh realities of the world forced open the once formidable iron bars. Tragedy struck within the walls of the White Gate, a tragedy that shook the very foundation of the most fundamental unit within Arabic culture, the family. A sister, a daughter, a beloved member of the community was lost in a car accident. Though I would never meet my aunt, I would hear bits and pieces from different relatives throughout the years. Your aunt would be the one to bring out a tray of fruit and start serving it to everyone, they would say. Or she had the ability to take a room filled with sadness and turn it into laughter. Bit by bit, with these individual pieces, I was able to complete the puzzle of her loss. My aunt was the glue that held my father's family together. Losing her left behind tattered pieces that I found easy to observe in my father. In every celebratory moment, I searched his eyes and saw a solemn look. I saw a fold in his forehead that held years of grief. I saw that his eyes were also searching for his sister, the person he needed to make those moments of happiness whole. The grief you feel from the loss of a family member never subsides. It is a shadow that follows you when the sun is burning bright and when the moon looms in the night. As a child, I often imagined what thoughts haunted my father, especially when he would find himself looking at those ornate iron bars. I imagined he'd ponder how every corridor within the stone walls of the white gate held her laughter, thinking, I can remember so clearly her iridescent eyes looking back at me as we ran around the courtyard exploring every nook of our home. When I walk the streets of Sulcud, I think back to us playing with our cousins on our bikes. She was my confidant, my most trusted companion in causing mischief to my mother's dismay. I used to imagine our future children playing on the land she helped me plant with our father. Suddenly, all of these memories, both imagined and real, were taken from me, just as she was. Of course, these thoughts did not only exist in my father's mind, they permeated throughout the household. The home beyond the white gate had a river of sadness flowing through it. This river made it impossible to stand within the stone walls without drowning. The white gate that once served to protect the family needed to be forced open. The flowing river needed to rush past the gate and run its course until it came upon dry land. And so it was decided that 1982 would be the year my family moved to America. Thank you.
May I invite you all to show your support to Hiba? Thank you very much. Powerful. I would like to introduce our third writer. Shalini Jasti was born in Kerala, India, but was brought to the United States by her parents when she was only 6 months old. Raised to understand the many cultures of India while in the United States, this has led her to seek out her bicultural identity as she hopes to be equally Indian and American. With the goal of becoming an educator, Shalini hopes that her piece about her relationship with her mother and literature will open a door for the authors of Southern Asian heritage to feel confident claiming their identity as writers. I'm proud to introduce you to Shalini.
Thank you for that nice introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm going to read my artist statement, and then I'm going to read a little bit of my piece called Mother Tongue. All right, this is my artist statement. My parents are both immigrants from Andhra Pradesh, India. While they raised me to be their modest Indian daughter, naming me after the characteristic they wanted me to maintain, they have told me little about their lives in India, almost as if the past is a secret that I am not allowed to know. Though I receive glimpses of their childhoods through windows of beach visits on the coast of Kerala and memories of schoolyard games and dirt playgrounds, India itself is a shattered glass mosaic that rests in a foggy recess of my mind. It is a fantastic land that I have not been to, yet it represents half of who I am. My parents brought me with them to the United States when I was 6 months old. As we moved from Pennsylvania to Ohio, ending in Illinois, India became a distant memory replaced with Midwestern suburbs, white faces, and American culture. Until sophomore year of college at the University of Iowa, I did not think about being Indian. I've always known I am Indian, but part of me did not accept that I always would be. Almost as if one day I would wake up and be someone else, would forget where I came from and deny my origins. I am no longer comfortable losing half of my identity to people who have different ideas of who they want me to be. Yet there is no clear path for me to take to begin reconciling my two identities now that I've come to the conclusion that I want both. I'm a person caught between the cultures of South India and America. My only hope is that I can continue to take refuge within my own writing, language being the one link between my two identities. Telugu slides from the tip of my tongue like silk or honey, and English sticks to the roof of my mouth like peanut butter, but both share space on countless pages in my writing. As I can no longer pretend to be white, I can't write in white either. I believe that the stories I am told by my parents and the narrative I have created for myself are as truthful and insightful as they can be. But I don't want anyone to believe that this is the story, the monolithic narrative of South Indian American women. I am one voice. I am compelled to write this essay from the deep desire to understand the parts of myself erased over years, reincarnated on the page to begin anew. All right, so that was my artist statement. Now I'm going to read part of my story. And just for a little bit of context, this is a part where I'm in school and I just sort of realize how different I am from the other students around me. Okay. It happens again in class when we are reading about animals. I say zebra with the classic Indian Z pronunciation, a sound that invokes a spaceship zipping through the air and planting an alien on the earth. I feel alien as my classmates laugh at my speech, and I'm ashamed of my own tongue. My mother gave me this tongue, one slick with an Indian accent, yet I am ungrateful. I vow then to master the English language in the way that I hear my classmates speak. I will tame my tongue to do what my mother never could. And with the intention to master and tame the language, English takes hold of my mind, making me realize its power and tranquility. Once I've mastered it, it brings me safety. My white classmates can only stare in awe as the brown girl masters their language better than them. I am nothing if I cannot craft my ideal self within blank pages, if I do not have space to show how I feel. My household, where the strongest form of human affection is the warmth of a freshly brewed cup of tea, is not the place to express emotions. This feeling of otherness happens for a final time once I officially declare my majors as English and creative writing and secondary English education. Within my newfound home of Iowa City, I think there is no better place to showcase my identity as a writer. I believe the promise of diversity and inclusion that the English program has advertised to me, but as I began attending American literature classes, analyzing the writing of colonizers, and finding no authors that can speak to my Indian upbringing, my stomach churns at the thought of my brown body taking up space among other white students at a predominantly white institution. The deep sickness continues as my friends, all white, never seem to understand why my writing or my culture is important to me, why their acts of othering me by saying they can't see me in the dark hurt my image of my body, or why their lack of presence at open mics and readings make me feel lost in a crowd of people I do not belong in. As quickly as Iowa City felt like home, the feeling of belonging vanished, along with my mother's support. All right, thanks everyone.
Mm. Can we all please show our support for Shalini? Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next writer and reader this evening. Kuponi Sawatl was born in Villanueva, Zacatecas, Mexico, and grew up in El Rancho La Jolla, Jerez, Zacatecas. And she'll correct me because I asked her to help me with those pronunciations. She grew up in her paternal grandparents' home. She migrated as a toddler to the United States and grew up in rural Conesville, Iowa. She obtained her MED with an emphasis in student affairs at Iowa State University and a BA in Spanish teaching at the University of Northern Iowa. She worked at the University of Iowa as an academic coach and is currently a teacher at West Liberty Schools. Kuponi Sawatl has a podcast titled Confessions of a Latina in the Midwest. Her work with the Bicultural Iowa Writers Fellowship explores belonging, traditions, identity, and her goal is to share testimonials of Latinx immigrants in the Midwest because often their stories are never told. It is a great pleasure to introduce Kuponi Sawatl.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I will begin with my artist statement. I was born in the silver state of Zacatecas, Mexico. I grew up in the house in El Rancho de La Jolla that was made by the hands of my abuelito and constructed of adobe bricks. As a toddler, I made the journey with my family to the United States, where we made Conesville, Iowa, our home. For the majority of my life, I have lived in rural areas. Rural living has always been a big part of my identity. It shaped my values and ethics, but it also prohibited me from experiencing opportunities. It wasn't until I left these two rural towns that I questioned who I was. What are you? Where are you from? Questions asked in a tone that made you feel like you weren't supposed to be there, that you were not supposed to have lived in Iowa most of your life. I asked myself if this is a different path I was taking, a path that no other person in my family had decided to take was worth it. I did not know how difficult or lonely the journey would be. In order to open those doors in my path, I had to gain strength from what I had and what I knew. That strength was so powerful because it came from the people who came before me. I am who I am because of the shoulders I stand on, and because of the stories of my people keep me from losing my identity, even during those times when I am questioned where I'm from. From mis tatarabuelos who resisted colonization, bisabuelas who kept the family together during La Revolución Mexicana, abuelos who came to work in the fields in the United States as braceros, and parents who worked tirelessly in meatpacking plants and construction. Their hard work has not been in vain. It's time to honor them by sharing a piece of us. Growing up, I never read stories that I could identify with, and the stories I read about Mexican people did not reflect my own lived experiences. Stories were often inaccurate and filled with stereotypes. We were often forgotten, even though Mexicans have been in Iowa since before it became a state. Stories were never written about those of us who lived in rural places like Conesville, Iowa. We, the people who live in these rural areas, are feeding the country, but we have been erased. Although my family passes down testimonios from generation to generation, we've never documented our history. And it's time to share un pedazo de nuestro testimonio, a piece of our story. Iowa has been a door for me. Often this door came with many locks, bolts, and bars, but it's been nice enough to keep me here. When people learn about my history and my culture, I hope they understand why traditions are sacred and how practicing our beliefs and values is a way of survival. Migrating puts us at risk of losing part of our identity because negative societal messages make us feel unempowered, a loss of sense of self in the face of white supremacism. Our identity is hanging by a thread, but it's also weaving into other threads that we've stumbled upon in the environment we live in. Because of this, we preserve what we can and hold on to it tightly. When our culture becomes appropriated, the traditions and customs start losing their purpose and meaning, and our existence starts to be erased or retold in an unauthentic way. I dream that others find beauty in their own story and are brave enough to share it themselves. Now, a piece from more than a piece of paper. This paper is más que un papel. It's my story. It's a reminder of how long I've come and what I've had to endure. It's the exhale of a long, deep breath I've been holding for almost 7 years, ever since my family came to Iowa from Mexico. This paper is a reminder of privilege. It's a chance. It's the American dream. It's like getting into college when no one in your family has ever gone to college, or finding out that after you studied so hard, you finally finally passed the driving exam to get your license. Es esperanza, hope. This paper is my permanent residency that gave me permission to travel back to Mexico. It's a little bent because it was stuck in a drawer for years. You can still feel the raised seal, and if you're not careful, the staple can prick you. My mom doesn't know I have it. She doesn't like us to have important documents because she thinks we're going to damage them, but it's mine. I'll never throw it away. The words on the paper are written in red like the big F the teacher wrote on my math test. I was never good at math, but I was good at English. I even got the Senior English Award. I'm proud of that award because English is not my first language. I don't like red markings on paper, but on this paper I do. On this paper, the things that are written are good. I'm almost 10 years old in the picture on my residency card, though I look younger. The picture is weird because nobody takes pictures facing the side like that for government identification anymore. You can see my ugly haircut, my copete all crooked and too short. I have the same ears as my dad. Que bueno that they only took one side of me because otherwise you would see the other one of my ears is bigger than the other. You can't tell yet that the sideburns would grow bigger throughout the years because I'm so hairy. You can barely see my mustache. A girl with a mustache? That was never fun. Estás bien peluda y pareces una changa. You're so hairy and look like a monkey. My sister and all the kids at school would laugh at me for this. I had hair on my knuckles and my toes. It was never a big deal until someone pointed it out. Like that one time on my way home from school, Adam and Andrew laughed at me on the school bus and with a pencil poked at my hairy toes. Look at her nasty feet. Ew, you need to shave that off. You're nasty. How could I shave them if my parents didn't let me? I hated PE because everyone would see my hairy legs when I changed into shorts. Hair has always been a complicated part of my identity. Yo anhelaba papeles. I had wanted papers for so long. I wanted them so I can return to the motherland, back to the silver mining state of Zacatecas, to the Pueblo Mágico, Jerez, Zacatecas. I would cry myself to sleep thinking that I would never see my abuelitos again. Algún día los volveremos a ver. One day we'll see them again. That's all my mom would say. She would especially say that when I would come home from school upset from school on Grandparents' Day. My classmates had their grandparents with them at school, and I didn't. We wouldn't even call our loved ones back home because they lived in El Rancho and there was no electricity there. The only thing we could do was send them letters. So I paid attention in class when we were writing so I can write letters to my abuelita. I learned to read and write in English, but I did my best writing out words in Spanish, and my sister would proofread them for me. She was a year ahead of me. She already knew how to sign her name in cursive. I couldn't wait to learn to write fancy words so I can sign my letters. My dad didn't always give us an allowance, but when he did, I would save los dólares to send in my grandma's letters, wrapping them in aluminum and tucking them between the folded cartas. You had to do that because if the mail people in Mexico looked through the envelope and saw the money, they would take them. But tomorrow never came. It took another 4 years until we saw each other again. My abuelita had a visa and she was able to come see us in Iowa during the summer. She couldn't come in the winter because she wouldn't aguantar el frío. She did not come often though, because she was getting sick and traveling was hard for her. We saw her again when we got our papers and traveled back to Mexico. We tried to stay in touch through cartitas, but after years, memories start to fade, and it all felt like a dream. Often the smell of fresh corn tortillas or the sound of chiles tostándose would take me back to those days in El Rancho, but I had forgotten the faces of mi gente, my people. We arrived in Iowa in the summer. It was so humid. It was a different kind of hot that we weren't used to. We didn't know anybody. We didn't speak English, and my mom didn't know how to drive, and there was no public transportation like in Mexico. We locked ourselves in the apartment. It was located downtown and had a lot of cockroaches when we first moved in. We had never had cockroaches in our house in Mexico. We lived on the first floor, and in the basement of the apartments lived Soledad, or Chole, one of my mom's Dominican friends, who had 2 kids around our age. Her Spanish was a little funny, and her food was different. She introduced us to arroz con habichuelas and bachata music. She really liked our Mexican food. The sidewalk and the stairs in the apartments were all cracked. We told the landlord to fix it, but they didn't. And my sister broke her arm because she fell on the cracked sidewalk. It was only then that they fixed it. There were no animals. The rooster didn't wake us up. We drank milk from a gallon jug and not fresh from the cow. It was cold inside the house because there was a box by the window that threw out air that felt like a freezer. We cried every day. We missed nature. We missed our casa de adobe. Thank you.
Can I just invite everyone to give her a clap? And at the end, after we clap for George, I'm going to invite you all to unmute and give a little bit of a yelp and some yowls and some louder applause. Wonderful. Well done. Thank you. I'll introduce now our final writer and reader for the evening. George Call was born in Haifa, Palestine. When he was 1 year old, his family escaped the 1948 war and settled in Cairo, Egypt, where they became refugees. With the continued unrest in the Middle East, his parents sent him and his 4 siblings to Iowa City, where they settled. He earned a computer science degree from the University of Iowa and founded Sound Clarity to dispense assistive hearing technology worldwide. He is writing his memoir to document his family's history and hopes to shed light on the plight of Palestinians in the diaspora. He lives in Iowa City with his wife of 48 years. It is a great pleasure to introduce to you George Call.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you everyone for attending. It's my pleasure to read my story. I was born in Haifa, Palestine, and my family and I fled to Cairo during the 1948 war with the intent of returning after the fighting ended. But the fighting did not end, and we were never able to return. We lost our home, our business, and friends. We became refugees in Egypt. While I lived a happy childhood in Cairo, I was unaware of the chaos and insecurities my parents weathered as they rebuilt our lives They would soon experience additional upheavals during the Egyptian Revolution and the nationalization of businesses. Sensing the need to leave the Middle East, my parents sent me to school in Jerusalem, Jordan, at age 13 to better master the English language, in addition to the Arabic and French I already spoke. Eventually, my parents succeeded in sending me and my siblings to Iowa City, but their effort cost them their lives before they were able to join us here. I struggled to adapt to a new culture in the United States. I lived in fear of being falsely labeled a Palestinian terrorist. As an 18-year-old immigrant, I had no podium to tell that Palestinians have the same aspirations as other human beings to live in peace, earn a decent living, and raise a family. Living in a multicultural place like Iowa City has brought my siblings and me comfort as we meet as other immigrants with similar stories of adapting to a new life in a new country. We all long for a place so far away, yet so close to our hearts. In writing, I find the courage to embrace my Palestinian heritage. I write to capture the memories of my family's struggles and victories, to honor my parents for their sacrifices, and to communicate my appreciation to them in written words I never had a chance to say to them while they were alive. My essay is titled Under the New Crescent Moon, and it is in the form of a letter to my parents to tell them what happened to me after I came to the US. When I began working on my memoir, I looked at all of our family photos from Palestine and Egypt, and I reread the letters you two sent me, my siblings and me, over the years when I was a boarder in Jerusalem, and then when I immigrated to the United States for college. I hope my words will honor you, as I have come to realize all the risks and sacrifices you made so my siblings and I could have a better life. My journey from Haifa to Cairo to Jerusalem to Beirut to Iowa City is complete. Your dream of sending all your children to the US came true. Doris, Olga, Nadia, Fuad are all you American citizens. Mama, I kept your memory alive by looking for the new crescent moon every month. I will never forget what you told me on the evening of January 26, 1952, now known as Black Saturday. I was 5 years old and terrified when I heard the screaming in the streets and saw buildings on fire in the neighborhood. Cairo was burning. Noticing my distress, you said, "George, ya habibi, let's go to the balcony to see the new crescent moon." I held your outstretched hand and followed you with anticipation. As we passed through the living room, I remember running my hand along the gray-veined marble coffee table to feel its smoothness. The sky was darkened with smoke, but you assured me that the crescent was right behind the haze. You guided my face toward the western sky, then pointed and said, "Behold your new crescent moon. May it bring you a blessed month." You took off your wedding band and told me to close my eyes. While you passed the band over each of my eyelids, you said, "This is to chase away and protect you from the evil eye of jealous people." You slid the band back on your finger, knelt next to me, and hugged me tight while saying, "The fires are gone. Don't be frightened, ya habibi." I breathed the comforting scent of your perfume, and my world was at peace. You took me back to the balcony the next 2 nights when we could clearly see the moon, and you promised that every month we would watch the new crescent moon together. 3 months later, at a picnic, I spotted the crescent moon. I asked you why was the moon here and not on our balcony. You smiled and said, "No matter where you are in the whole wide world, the moon will follow you." I pondered your answer for a moment and asked, "Will it follow me even if I am back in Palestine?" You closed your eyes and nodded. "Yes, ya habibi." You had the same look as when you told me stories about the wonderful life our family shared in Palestine, a life I was too young to remember, because I was only a baby when we fled. Now, when I spot the crescent, I repeat your precious words to whoever is with me at that moment. I still have your wedding band that you rub gently across my eyelids. I have shared your story with my daughter, the granddaughter you never met. And each month, when the new crescent moon appears, she thinks of us on the balcony that night. When I landed in Iowa, I was excited yet frightened. Iowa City was small compared to Haifa, Cairo, Jerusalem, and Beirut. But the landscape called me with its rolling hills, and the symmetrical rows of corn instilled a sense of order amid the chaos I felt after being uprooted so many times. The bales of hay and colors of the fields signaled the predictable changing of seasons, unlike the monotony of the desert landscape in Cairo. I saw Amish horse-drawn buggies transporting families rather than donkey-drawn carts hauling fruits and vegetables to the open market. I listened to the quiet traffic, absent the chaos, congestion, and blaring car horns of Cairo. I saw wide streets and homes surrounded by green lawns. I walked through snow in the harsh winter with my first pair of boots, winter parka, and wool hat. I wish you could have experienced these things with me. At first, it didn't seem Americans wanted to get to know me, but as I mingled with students in classes at my summer jobs, I find them to be inquisitive and welcoming. When people asked me where I was from, I hesitated while my thoughts raced to decide what to answer. I was afraid to say I'm from Palestine. I worried that the US saw all Palestinians, whether Christian or Muslim, as obstacles to Israel's control of Palestine. So when people asked where I was from, I always said Lebanon, because it was a neutral country. I secretly hated myself each time I refused to say, I am from Palestine. Mama, 3 months after your death, I met Barbara from Fairbank, Iowa. Fairbank is a small town of 800 people, enough to fill 10 apartment buildings in our neighborhood in Cairo. Barbara's parents were surprised that I asked their permission to marry her. But that was what all respectful Palestinian men did. You both taught me that, Mama and Baba. She immediately loved Palestinian cooking, and my sisters taught her how to make kibbeh, stuffed grape leaves, and baklava. Her parents and large extended family officially welcomed me into their family when we married in 1972. I taught them that it was okay to hug and kiss on the cheeks, a tradition mastered by all Palestinians, yet unknown to her German clan. I liked Iowa City and Iowa, but I missed many things about Cairo. I missed the street vendors peddling grilled corn, tamarind juice, and sugarcane juice. I missed the daily blaring call for prayers by the muezzins. I missed walking by the sidewalk cafes where men smoked shishas and the percolating water from each pipe merging with the others until they sounded like drums in a symphony hall. I missed standing near the calming sandstone of the pyramids, stroking the large stones to feel their history while thinking about the people of the past who had walked, toiled, and breathed in the exact spot where I was standing. I missed the weekends when you serenaded us on the piano and played without sheet music, saying Parole. And most of all, I missed the aromas of rose water and orange blossom water when making mamoul with you, my sisters, and Grandma Noor around Easter and Christmas. I make it now to share with friends and family, and I always remember how Mama taught me to pinch the top of the dough. Mama and Baba, you set me on a new life's journey, one that brought me and my siblings to Iowa. We are all together again and have passed our Palestinian heritage to your 7 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren. I am loved by Barbara's family, and we often visit her childhood home in Fairbank to share stories of our families, including all you did to send your children to a land of peace, acceptance, and opportunity. I will always remember both of you in my new home in Iowa, a place that is lush and green, where the new crescent moon shines as brightly as it did in Cairo and Haifa. After I finish this letter to you, I will remain at my desk and return to my memoir. It is early evening, and as I do every month, I look to the west and hope for a clear sky to find the crescent moon. And that's my story.
Can I invite you all to show support for George and also to unmute and to show your support for all 5 of these writers? Let's hear it, Iowa. If you can reach that, whoop, whoop.